evening, everybody. So I've been asked to come and speak about my entrepreneurial journey. My entrepreneurial journey I'm going to break into two parts. The first part is obviously the beginning my entrepreneurial journey, and then the second part is becoming the entrepreneurial journey. I'm going to be breaking my talk down into three chapters. The first chapter is beginning. The second chapter is becoming. And the third chapter is belonging. And each of these chapters represents a phase in my life where I acquired lessons and fundamental principles that I use every day as an entrepreneur. And within each of those chapters, I'm going to share some of those tools with you. So you ready? Excellent. So, chapter 1, beginning. I was fortunate enough to be born in Vancouver, woohoo. And shortly thereafter, my mother and father took us back to Toronto, where the family nucleus was. They had come out west for a short period of time and then had me and then went back. I guess I was meant to be born here. A few years after that, my father decided to abandon us. And so I was about 2 years old, 3 years old, and my father left, leaving me and my mother to fend for ourselves. The amazing part is, though, that we had first of all, my mother was an absolute warrior goddess. She's here right now. Please give her a round of applause. We also had a small but very close family, and probably two of the most important people in my world were my grandmother and my grandfather. And my grandmother is here this evening. Please give her a round of applause. So I came from a blue-collar background, so I was the first in my family to graduate from college. My mother was an extremely hard worker working in Toronto, and sort of fast forward, I spent a lot of time on my own. I spent a lot of time learning. I loved reading and I loved absorbing information. And I spent a lot of time playing sports. And in particular, I was a pretty good baseball player, good enough to play at a pretty high level of competition. And I loved martial arts. Going into my teenage years, I completely did the typical cliche teenage thing and became a gangster. So I grew up in a relatively rough part of town in Toronto, and decided that I was going to start causing some trouble. I don't know what I was trying to prove, but anyways, I was fortunate enough to get out of that. But that was sort of the first part of the chapter, and there are really three things that I take out of that as it relates to remember the toolkit for entrepreneurship. One is love and support. And so one person who wasn't involved in that chapter, who has been involved in chapters 2 and 3, is my lovely partner in crime, Flo. Please give her a round of applause. An entrepreneur will never succeed without love and support from their family. And you can see tonight that I stand here as an entrepreneur, and I have the love and support of my family. So that's tool number 1 in the first chapter. Tool number 2 in the first chapter is we need heroes. Not heroes like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. My hero was my grandfather. This was the greatest man in my world who taught me how to be a man, how to have integrity, how to have courage and strength. And I use that every single day as I go into being an entrepreneur. My other heroes, John Lennon, and you can tell by the hair, John Lennon and John F. Kennedy, strangely enough. But my real hero was my grandfather. And in my toolkit as an entrepreneur, I constantly refer back to that, back to the lessons he taught me. The third part is, and I learned this from sports, you are going to get the absolute crap kicked out of you as an entrepreneur. And you need to understand that whatever you think is hard work and discipline, magnify that by 10x. That's what is going to be required of you to bring forward a vision or something to the world. So hard work and discipline, heroes, and love and support. Chapter 2, becoming. Came out of college, and I had one thing in my mind and one thing only, and that was security. I had come from a modest family. We didn't have much, so I was focused on, okay, Sean, go out and get as much security as you can. I had no idea what security meant. I really didn't know what it meant to have money. We didn't have much of it when I was growing up. But I knew that, okay, I'm an adult now, I need to go and get security. So I put my head down and I got to work. And I didn't have a lot of advantages going into my career. I didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. I didn't come from a lineage of big powerhouse business players. I knew I was going to get by on my hard work, so I did that. And I got pretty good at that. And so in the first part of my career, I worked in the public sector with education as a consultant. And then in the second part of my career, worked in the private sector, and I'll talk about that in a minute. First phase of that was about collecting capabilities. And so I was learning how to read balance sheets, I was learning how to interpret income statements, I was learning about what strategy meant, I was taking courses, I was absorbing information. Then I started to perform really well, so people said, okay, can you show these people how to do what you're doing? And I became a manager. And I started managing some people and started to learn new skills as it relates to management. And then eventually I became a vice president in the private sector, and that was now managing people who manage people. And I was starting to transform from, okay, I've learned a whole bunch of stuff in terms of how business operates. I've learned now how to manage people. And as I became a vice president and then eventually moved into a CEO role, so you can imagine I'm 34 years old, I'm running a $250 million global company, one of the largest exporters in BC, and I'm learning how to be a leader. And I didn't realize what leadership meant versus management. So that's sort of a fast forward through chapter 2. The 3 tools to chapter 2 that I took. Number 1, people say cash is king or queen. I don't believe that at all, given my experience in business. I believe that cash is the blood, and customers are the brain. So with cash, you can survive. But without customers, you can't thrive. And so if you're looking at a business, always obsessively be thinking about your customer. Number 2, what is leadership? And to me, I went through a massive process that included executive coaches and programs. I ended up getting my MBA in between all of this. And the thing I learned when I came out on the other side of it, very simple, ego-less. No ego. Doesn't matter. You are a servant leader. Your job is to bring the best out in people and bring the best product forward for customers. The third part is you cannot be a successful entrepreneur without actually having some skills and experiences. And so we read about this idea that's been sort of glamorized, that the 21-year-old that comes out of university comes up with a great innovation, builds $1 billion company, exits, and that's what entrepreneurship is. The reality is there's not one piece of data that actually validates that that's how a successful entrepreneur actually goes on the trajectory of building a great company. Entrepreneurs have experience. They've learned skills. They need to understand financial statements, understand strategic plans, and take in all of that knowledge. So it's not enough to roll the dice and say, I have a great idea and an innovation, and it's just the world's going to accept that. To build a sustainable, successful company, you do need those skills. Chapter 3, belonging. Happily doing what I was doing, running a large company, finally having come to the conclusion that I was reaching sort of a point of being ego-less, I realized that there was something missing. And at that point, remember, I was running a large company. I wasn't an entrepreneur. In 2016, in Q1, I attended a conference of the Young Presidents Organization in Dubai. And at 10 o'clock in the morning, a group of Syrian women got on stage. They spoke about the atrocities of women during the Syrian civil war. And 1 hour later, I was completely changed. I had to do something different with my life. I had to take what I knew, what my experience was, my energy, my passion, and actually contribute that to making this an impactful change in the world. I had no idea what that meant. I just knew that I needed to do that. So I got to work and have developed a methodology called quantum labor analysis. I won't bore you with that. I run a company that's an artificial intelligence company. We're one of the fastest growing technology companies in Canada and in North America. We are a Forbes top technology companies to watch. We work with the military, we work with large Fortune 500 organizations, and I'm happy to, we're all over the internet if you want to research us, and that's not the purpose for this talk. And so, how do we get from that moment in Dubai until now? And those are really the three tools that I want to talk about in this chapter. Number one is finding your purpose. What changed for me in Dubai was that purpose exercise. It had been something that I'd written on whiteboards when consultants came in or teachers came in and said, this is how you develop a purpose. That day, my purpose completely shifted, and I have my own definition that I want to share with you. And if there's one thing that I want you to take from my talk tonight, it's this. My definition of purpose is an undying love affair with something bigger than you. You are so obsessed to solve the problem that you don't care if you're accepted or rejected, if you win or lose, if you succeed or fail. Your only goal is to get up every day and solve that problem. If you have that sense of purpose, it will be very difficult to fail as an entrepreneur because you will be ready for everything that is going to throw at you in terms of the challenges that you're going to face. The second part is overcoming the jump. One of the things I learned after making the jump, and thank you Flo for helping me do that, one of the things I learned in making the jump was my fear before making the jump was security, going back to the point in the start of chapter 2. How could I possibly do this? I'm at that point 36 years old, 2 kids, mortgage, all of that stuff. How could I possibly make this jump? And what I realize now that I did make that jump, and I did get bashed quite a bit going on the way down that cliff as people talk about, is my interpretation of risk was completely out to lunch. Because at the end of the day, if I were laying on my deathbed, whenever that's going to be, my biggest regret, and I know it, would be have not jumped. If I didn't jump, I would regret that for the rest of my life. And you realize when you come to the other side of this that guess what? If my company crashes and burns tomorrow, I can get up, dust myself off, and get back to work fulfilling my purpose, however that looks like. So don't look at the jump financially or economically. Think about it from a different perspective, which is about your values and what life will be without having taken that opportunity. Because I know you all think about it. Everybody thinks about an idea they have that they want to bring to the world. Number 3, always maintain authenticity. I haven't worn a jacket or a suit since chapter 2, and it's the most liberating thing in the world. And I'm completely authentic when I speak to groups. I'm completely authentic when I'm building my product. I'm completely authentic when I'm dealing with customers. And as a result of that, the articulation of my company is extremely unique and professional. And the best entrepreneurs that I meet have that same level of authenticity with them. So the reason why you need that authenticity is because you're going to build a vision and a culture and align a team around that need to follow you on that path. They need to be the warriors that they're with you on the path. And if it's not authentic, eventually things crack. Have you ever worked for a place where you question authenticity? Raise your hand. Where you question authenticity, right? You're not raising your hand, but I know you agree. And so that point of authenticity is extremely important. So, beginning, becoming, belonging. Number one thing I invite you to do tonight is think about what is truly your purpose based on the definition I gave you. Thank you very much.